welcome everyone. Welcome everyone, like in New York. We have people in New York, Brazil, Switzerland, and Switzerland, like this room with the actual students in it. So we are not only online, but hello to the online guests as well. My name is Gabriela Deveau. I work at Swissnex in Brazil as arts and creative industry lead. And today I'm really happy to host this international lecture about ephemeral histories, a global South dialogue on the evolution of European modernism in design. So I would like to thank quickly Matheus Leston, Osmond Tshuma for their time and presence, Felipe Kaizer from FAUSP, Daniela Mirabella from ZHDK, and Sophie Grossmann from the Museum für Gestaltung for their partnership, and Swissnex India also for working with us on this topic. So before we start, I would like to tell you a little bit quickly about Swissnex. So, what is Swissnex? So, we are a global network connecting Switzerland and the world in education, research, and innovation. And we are an initiative from the State Secretariat for Education, Research, and Innovation. We call it SERI in Switzerland. And our mission is to support our partners' outreach, activate active engagement in their international exchange of knowledge, ideas, and talents. And I wanted to share you this picture, but we have a picture that shows really nice the interactions. It's not here, Matheus, is another slide, but it's okay. So in this picture, we see where the research collaboration around the world are happening, and the Swissnex are located in those six locations. So those are the world's most innovative regions. And so we have it in San Francisco, New York, Boston, Brazil, India, China, and Japan. And together with around 20 science and technology officers and counselors based in Swiss Embassy, we all contribute to strengthening Switzerland profile as a world-leading innovation hotspot. So we work with all kinds of projects coming from Switzerland and help internationalize them in our location. So everyone keep us in mind if you want to reach out to us someday in the future. So this year, the Museum für Gestaltung Zürich, it's the Switzerland's leading design and visual communication institution, is celebrating his 150th anniversary. For this occasion, an exhibition will open in August in Zurich, and in which 6 works born from a collaboration between the Museum für Gestaltung and Swissnex network. It will be on display as part of the exhibition Museum of the Future 17 Digital Experiments. So other events like that, like today, like talks and other exhibitions are also taking place between last month and this month around these projects in Japan, in the US, China, India, and today here in Brazil, connecting with Switzerland and Osmond in New York. So this lecture was idealized by the Swissnex Brazil and Swissnex India and the Museum für Gestaltung with Sophie Grossmann as curator. So quickly about Sophie. Sophie was there in the whole process. Amazing partnership. So Sophie is a research associate at the Museum für Gestaltung in Zurich, specializing in collection of intangible cultural assets such as digital born and hybrid objects. She holds degree in cultural publishing and art history. Since 2022, has held case studies and collaborated with artists and institutions to curate exhibition on digital collection, presenting her work at venues including Istituto Svizzero in Rome and at the University of Bern. Please note that the lecture today and that we will continue talking about this topic in India at the end of the month. And all the information is on the website. So the idea is that this topic will follow in India as well. So the idea to see what the Global South has to talk about it. And so, Daniela, thank you for integrating this lecture into your semester. And the floor is yours. I hope everyone enjoys.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everyone, and welcome from our side. We are very happy to have you all here, coming from different countries and different cultures, and then that we could join with our course on social history of graphic design. Let me briefly say a few words to our context. Here with me are bachelor students from the second semester. They come from various design fields. Biggest group is from visual communication, then we have interaction designers, we have industrial design from the trends and identity class, and also from the Department of Art Education. In our course, we have been looking at design history not just as a timeline of styles, but as a social and cultural practice. And we've looked at topics such as how does design intersect with politics, education, technology, activism, and how is design remembered and how is it forgotten, and who gets to tell the story and who remains invisible. Each student has selected a design object and explored this in depth. And through this object, we looked at broader systems of circulation, of visibility, and of inclusion and exclusion. And that's why today's session is so valuable for us. It brings in further perspectives that help us look at what is told, narrated in design history, and what is left out. So let me quickly introduce the speakers. First, welcome to Matheus Leston. He's we have a small image here waving down. He's an artist and musician from Sao Paulo. He works across disciplines, combining programming, sound, and visual systems. His contribution to this collaboration explores data visualization and memory cultures in Brazil and Switzerland. For this session, he also contributed a text by Roberto Schwarz that examines what happens when European modernism is translated into very different social contexts. Then also hi to Osmond Tshuma, joining in from New York. Osmond is originally from Zimbabwe. He runs a design studio in South Africa and is currently residing in the US. He just completed his master thesis, so congrats on that again. And he's also teaching at the graphic design department at the RISD, the Rhode Island Institute of Design. He works with graphic design, especially type design, as a way to explore and remember African identities. This is also the text he contributed, is focusing on this topic. In his project for this museum Swissnex collaboration, he drew on protest posters and recontextualized them within stories of South African resistance. And lastly, today's discussion will be moderated by Felipe Kaizer, a graphic designer and researcher based in Sao Paulo. He's a professor of design history and the social foundations of design at the University of Sao Paulo. He holds a PhD in design theory and has worked both in academia and in practical design contexts. So, Felipe, thank you so much for guiding us through this conversation. And last but not least, also a warm welcome to the students of Felipe who will look at this session later on through the recording. So thank you again, and I think we begin with Matheus' presentation.
Yes, so hello everybody. So first of all, I'd like to say thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here and talking to you online and on the class. And also I'd like to thank everybody at Swissnex, but especially Gabriela, of course, for making this happen, Osmond and Felipe for exchanging, and Sophie for the invitation and all the exchange during this period, which was quite long. And so what I want to talk about is what I thought that might be interesting to share with you is the process of how my work that I'll be presenting came to be, how the discovery process was and how the development of the piece happened, because then I'll like to share with you the process of discovery, because this was really truly a research project for me in the relationships between Swiss design and Brazilian design. So I'm not a designer per se. I worked with design for a while because I'm a programmer and I do a lot of work for brands and I don't know, other artists and things like that. Not only creating my own projects, my personal projects, but also commercial projects. And I worked quite a lot with generative design and this kind of thing. So I have a big proximity with designers, and also I love design. So I'm not a designer, but I self-taught history of design student in a way. And this was really a project in which I learned a lot about the history of Brazilian design, and I'd like to share with you how it all happened. So let me share my screen. Please let me know if you are seeing it. Just a second. Okay, for some reason I can't share my sound now. Let's see if I can do that again. It was working, it's not anymore. No worries. Can you see my screen? Okay.
Yeah, it's working.
Yes, we can see it.
Let me just see if I can share the sound, because it was working at the beginning, not anymore. Let me try again, just a second. Okay, no. So no sound, no worries. So the work that I'm going to show you is called Dueto Contraponto Paralaxe in Portuguese. You can see my screen again, right? Just check. Okay.
Yes,
Perfect.
we can see it.
Perfect, thank you. So this is the title of the screen, which is the work Dueto Contraponto Paralaxe, but also in English, as you can imagine, it's pretty straightforward. Duet, counterpoint, and parallax. So the idea of this piece started with a very interesting invitation from the Museum for Gestaltung, which was that it's something that I really like to do, which is not to have a blank page, was to have some kind of guidance in a way to create a piece. And the idea was to create a piece based on the museum's collection and based specifically in eMuseum, which is the digital archive of all the images that the museum have in the collection. So the first idea was to just check it out and just to see if I find something interesting. Sophie also contributed with a few ideas. But of course, the first thing that I did that was of interest to me was to look at Brazilian designers that there are in the collection. And what I found was that there are three designers that really stood up for me. The first one is Mari Vieira. There was quite a lot of, not that many of her pieces, but 10 pieces in the collection, which is quite substantial. Almir Mavinier, 35 pieces, as you can see in the results, and also Alexandre Wollner with just one. And it was an idea of the exhibition itself to show my work next to one of the pieces that were in the collection. So this is the one that I chose, the one from Alexandre Wollner. And this is the poster for the 4th Bienal de São Paulo, which I'm not sure if you're aware, but it's probably one of the biggest art exhibitions in the world. It's like a contemporary art exhibition, a really huge one, a big exhibition, and it really transforms the city when it's happening, the cultural landscape of the city. And he did the poster of the fourth Biennale. And it's kind of interesting because he did this while he was in Germany and studying in Ulm, in the Hochschule für Gestaltung. So actually, what stood up from these three designers to me was that all of them actually studied in the Hochschule für Gestaltung in Ulm. Those three were students of Max Bill. So what I decided to do was, I'll tell you a little bit more about this piece later on and why I chose this one. But the first thing that I decided to do was to research a little bit about Max Bill as well in the museum's archive. And well, as you can imagine, there were quite a lot of things about Max Bill, 356 pieces of him, which is not a surprise in any way, of course. But what I decided to do, and I want to tell you, is here in Brazil and with Biennale, which is the poster that I selected, we have a very strong connection with Max Bill. And I'll tell you a little bit about it. So this, as you can see, is an exhibition that happened here in Brazil in 1951. And this one here, can you see my mouse? This piece here at the left, it's called the Tripartite Unity, or as we call here in Brazil, Unidade Tripartida, or as the German name, I think it's Dreigleidige Einheit. So this piece is really important in Brazilian design history. Why is that? Because actually it was present at the very first Biennale, which was in 1951, and it won a prize of sculpture. And the interesting thing is that the gossip, the things that we hear up until now, is that this piece marks the beginning of the concrete art in Brazil, and that the presence of this piece in the first Biennale was actually something that really changed the landscape. So that's the story that we hear. I'm not quite sure if it's true or not, but that's what we hear and what's being told and replicated. Those things that, you know how it happens, we just repeat things without even knowing if it's true or not. But the thing is, it was really important for us, and it is in the collection of MAC, Museum of Contemporary Art here in São Paulo. And it's a very important piece, a Max Bill piece that came to Brazil. But the thing is, what I want to do with this project was to see how this history is being told here in Brazil and in Switzerland. What are the differences? What is, for example, this piece is probably the most important Max Bill piece for us Brazilians. But what about people from Switzerland or Germany? Is it that expressive? Is it really important or not? So what I decided to do was to make a comparison. And the comparison that I wanted to do was just Max Bill in Switzerland and in Brazil. So this is a frame from the work itself. All the time the work is divided in half, and one half is, and the two halves are dialoguing. And in the first part of the work, the things that it's comparing is the images that are in the Museum für Gestaltung and in Fundação Bienal de São Paulo. And it's just a comparison of both archives and both collections. What is the comparison? What there is of difference in regards to this piece? So unfortunately, I think you won't be able to hear the sound because I can share it, but that's not an issue. Can you hear it? No, right? Okay, no worries.
No.
No worries. So this is what I found. So as you can see,
the sound is on. It's working.
I think it's coming through my microphone, right? So
maybe, yeah. Sorry.
No worries. So this is what I found interesting. I compared what we had in Bienal de São Paulo, the archive that we have here, and Museum for Gestaltung. And in the Museum for Gestaltung, you have 401 images of Max Bill, and not even once this sculpture appears. And in Brazil, we have 26 images of Max Bill, and 16 of those are the Unidade Tripartida. So there is a really interesting difference in this perspective. In a way, this piece is really important for us and doesn't even appear in the collection of the museum for Gestaltung. So that kept me make me start to think, like, okay, so what are the differences here? But one thing that I need to say, which is really important, is that the collection of the archive here in Brazil of the Fundação Bienal doesn't have a collection. It has an historical archive. So it's mostly focused on documents. It's not pieces of art or design or whatever. It's just documents that actually the name of the archive, Wanda Svevo, is the name of the secretary of the institution. So she collected all the documents and then started the archive, which is really an amazing research place here in São Paulo. So then I decided, well, okay, so those are two very different perspectives that are very institutionalized. So what can we see that is not that institutionalized? Is there something else that I can search in regards to data, which is not me saying things, but researching in the data, in a data set, to see if there are other differences? So what I did is like what everybody does, at least my age, which is go to Google, first and foremost. And what I decided to do was to make the same search, the same query, the same term, which was Max Bill, in the Swiss Google and in Brazilian Google. So just seeing domains that ended with CH and ended with BR. And this is the comparison that I saw. Okay, so now things are a little bit more similar. The narratives maybe are converging in a way. But as you can see, out of 417 search results that I found here in Brazil, 11 of those were the tripartite unity, that piece that I showed you, and only 3 in Switzerland from 581. So indeed, it's a bit weird. This story is not being told correctly. And actually, when I went to research it, I found out that this image that I showed you before is not actually from the Bienal, but it was from another exhibition that have a lot of pieces by Max Bill. Not only this one, but all of those are Max Bill pieces, I believe, which was a little bit before the Bienal, in 1951 as well. So actually, it was in another institution in MAN here in São Paulo. And people said that actually this one was the important exhibition. This was the exhibition that really made Brazilian artists and designers change their views, because they saw Max Bill creating pieces that were actually from design, from painting, from posters, from architecture, and so on. And that was really inspiring. One of those people was Alexandre Wollner, the designer that I want to talk about a little bit after, that I also choose to show in this piece and of the poster. He worked at this exhibition as a young student, and he was not a designer at the time and not an artist at the time, but he worked in this exhibition, and he said that it was really inspiring. And this is when the gossip starts, because there are some documents that actually there was some sort of institutional drama, because Bienal was doing the first Bienal, and Bienal really wanted a Max Bill piece, but there was already this exhibition in São Paulo that happened. So what happened was that because of some bureaucratic thing, all the pieces were stuck in Brazil. They were going to go to Argentina for another exhibition, but they were stuck. And Bienal asked to Max Bill, can we show you some of your pieces? And he said, okay, you can just open one of the crates and show it. And that's how Unidade Tripartida, the tripartite unity, came to the Bienal and won the first prize. And when he won the first prize, Max Bill, there is also a correspondence in which he says that he was a bit shocked because it made no sense for him to win. So as you can see, we start with the narrative that already is a bit off. It's a bit off-putting as well, because there is some institutional issues, and that really changed the history that is being told. So this idea that the presence of this piece in the first Biennale was like the most spectacular thing, maybe not that true, but it is what is being told time and time again here in Brazil, which is kind of interesting. But also something else that is interesting, not sure if you see, because the images were so fast in the piece, but how many watches appeared in the Google search, right? So it was quite interesting to see that so many watches, when you search for Max Bill in Google, I mean, here in Brazil, at least, more than half the images that show up are the watches. So I'll just leave it there, just for you to think about it. But it's kind of funny. And then I decided to look at those three designers and artists that I selected before, which were the three students from Max Bill, the three Brazilians that went to study in the Hochschule für Gestaltung in Ulm and studied with Max Bill. So I created this new study called Brazilians in Ulm, and I just want to show you very quickly those images, just to show you what I found really interesting and curious about. So this is a comparison of Mari Vieira pieces in the Museum für Gestaltung and in Fundação Bienal. So as you can see, what I found interesting in this is that there are much more of her pieces as an artist and not that much as a designer. Then Almir Mavigné, this is the same comparison. And what I found really interesting here is, as you can see in the archive here in Bienal, we have only documents, and all the documents, almost all the documents, are about money, because he sent the piece from Germany to Brazil to be shown, and it was stuck with some bureaucratic things, and they were charging him extra money and so on. So everything is about money in a way. So I found it really interesting as well. And then Alexandre Wollner, which in the Museum für Gestaltung, there is just one image, just this poster from the first Biennale. But why is that so much of note? Why was I really shocked, in a way, to see that there is just one piece by Alexandre Wollner and a lot of pieces from those other artists? Not a lot, but 10 and 35 pieces from these other designers. Because for sure, Alexandre Wollner was the one that was most impactful in Brazilian design, by far. I think his name is ubiquitous here in Brazil. Everybody knows Alexandre Wollner. When I going through the research, I found actually that he is quoted as the most important designer in Brazilian history, and quite a lot of times, maybe we can discuss if that's true or not, but he's really, really, really important. And if you look at the Google search, then we can see how many pieces they have of him and how really impactful he was in Brazilian design. So there's quite a lot, as you can see. So what I decided to do was to go and research Wollner and the influence that Wollner had in Brazilian design. So this is very interesting, because Wollner is the only one of those three that I showed you that came back. Marvigné lived in Germany, and Mari Vieira lived in Switzerland, And there is quite a lot of discussion of how important they were for Brazilian art and design, because they just left Brazil and they lived in Europe for the rest of their lives. But Wöllner came back to Brazil and he created Forming Form, which is like probably the first design studio here in Brazil that really thought about branding in a modern way and applied the ideas of the own Hochschule für Gestaltung here in Brazil, and really transformed Brazilian everyday life, design-wise at least. So I just want to show you that what I did in my research was to look at the original logos that Wöllner designed in the 50s and 60s and 80s and compare to what they are right now, because what's happening is that his logos are nowadays dying. They are changing it. A few of them are still the same, and a few of them are just going away. So this is from as you can see, Atlas, which is like a elevator brand. Cinemateca, which is one of his most talked about logos. I think you can see why. Heading, which is a brand of t-shirts. Actually, I'm wearing a Heading t-shirt right now, which is really ubiquitous here in Brazil. It's like in every corner and really cheap clothing. Itaú, which was like a big controversy because they changed a little bit the logo and people think it looks awful right now. And I do agree that it looks kind of awful, but it is like probably the most well-known of Wöllner's designs up until now, because there is in Itaú in every corner as well. The Museum of Modern Art in Rio de Janeiro. Papais, which is a brand of padlocks and what is it called? Like locks for doors as well. Filco, which is like a brand of, I don't know, appliances. Ultragás. Coqueiro, which is a brand of tuna and sardines. And here I want to open up a new parenthesis, because this is the one that I like the most. Which, look at this. Those were the sardine cans, and actually this design that Wöllner created lasted 42 years. These were the sardine cans that were available in the supermarket for real for 42 years, and it was only changed for this extremely ugly design in 2000. But this was the design that Wöllner created, and it really resonates with me. I think it's beautiful. And the Museum of Contemporary Art here in São Paulo. So as you can see, the things that he did were actually in everyday Brazilian life. Not Mavinier, not Mari Vieira, but Wöllner really, truly is. I think that most Brazilians, at least my age, would recognize the original brands, maybe not the new one, but the original one that Wöllner created up until now. They still recognize those brands, which is really something interesting to think about, like how durable those images are and what he created is. I think my time is up, but if I can just take 4 minutes extra, I just like to do something quite important. If you don't mind, I'll really try to be brief here. But I just want to say something just to conclude, just to leave you with why I chose the text that I chose as well, to show you a few things. So I'll do something absolutely different here. I'll go to somewhere. Bear with me. Let's go in this journey together. But I'll show you a few pictures that are really weird, actually. So this is a French artist that came to Brazil in the 1800s with the mission to document Brazilian life, this wild life here in Brazil that we had, and to portray how it was. And I'm not sure how it resonates with you, but I can say how it resonates with us Brazilians. it's really weird to look at those images because it is French watercolors depicting slaves. So as you can see, it's a very, very, you can see the posture of those slaves that they are, it's a very European centric way of portraying a reality that had nothing to do with France. So I'll just leave it there just to show you this. For me, it's really disconcerting to see those images because, you know, the form is an European form, but the content is a Brazilian content. So I think Debré did the best. The full name is Jean-Baptiste Debré. So he tried to do what he knew. And what he knew was to do French watercolors. And he brought it to Brazil to represent a brutal, brutal slavery. And the society was not the same as France. It makes no sense. So it created like this rupture that is really something that travels through Brazilian art. That is that there is this European way of thinking and thinking that it is universal, but when you apply it to Brazil, it makes no sense because the society here is different and the forms are completely created based on the society that they were created on. So that's my thesis. And I just want to show one extra image that I found. I find this, I don't know, this is just absolutely bizarre. He's representing the indigenous people here in Brazil, and they are not like this at all. He just created out of his mind. And this is a depiction of an indigenous warrior, but it's not like this. It's not at all. He just made it up. So the documentation of Brazilian wildlife, as it was called back then, is based on a lie. So I just want to finish with this idea of importing this scheme from Europe and applying to a society which is not European makes no sense. Some adjustments and it dislocates, and maybe we should work in this lodged position. And that's why I find it really interesting to show you this, which is the history that I am trying to tell with my piece, which is to start with the tripartite unity in Switzerland and finish with a can of sardines in the supermarkets in Brazil. So that's it. Thank you so much. I hope it was interesting for you all, and I can't wait to talk a little bit more later. So Osmond, I think now it's with you. Thank you so much, and sorry for taking a bit of your time.
Thank you so much for opening the floor. Let me present. I'd like to read like a few paragraphs from that I wrote for my thesis. Yeah. I hope you can all hear me quite well. So then what I'm gonna read, it's my response to an article written by Ramon Tejeda. Like the article is called "We Must Topple the Trops, Cripple the Cannon," which was published in 2018 in Walker Art Center. So my response reads: decolonization is always a violent phenomenon. By Franz Fanon expresses the feeling I received when I was reading the article, "We Must Topple the Trops, Cripple the Cannon." Freedom is never violently given by the oppressor. It must be, sorry, let me start that again. Decolonization is always a violent phenomenon by Francis Fanon expresses the feeling I received when I was reading the article, we must topple the troops, cripple the cannon, 2018. This quote supports the idea that freedom is never violently given, but the freedom is never violently given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed. The article spoke about decolonizing design and how the system must allow other voices to be heard. Posed many questions about how we fight for equal rights and questioned educators and how much effort we are really making in decolonizing design. The article poses numerous critical questions. I don't think I have what it takes to respond to all of them right now. However, I'll try to respond to the first question. How does our engagement outside in our world manifest itself in our art and design narratives, the field, the work, the examples that we advocate, exemplify, and teach? As a designer who is always thinking about how we decolonize design, from breaking the grid to celebrating the African identity by looking inward, I've started to question how I write those protest placards, how I write that letter to my grandmother, how I write my name. As I write this response, I'm using the Latin script, a script imposed on 2/3 of Africans through the colonization of Africa. Writing is one of the most dominant colonial residues of history. Graphic design is about communicating. Even if I visually decolonize design, does it matter when I write about my work in Latin? I always say I search for an African design in every brief. Does it achieve this when I write about my work in a Latin script? So yeah, I just wanted to read that as just to give you the sense of positionality where I am right now with my work and my practice. Yeah, and thank you for having me here. I am Osmond Tshuma. I'm a Melbourne designer, art director, typographer, and a co-founder of Mom Gobo's Design Factory, a South African design studio dedicated to celebrating African identity. And thank you for having me here. To everybody involved, welcome. So my presentation is centered around my practice and then how it plugs into the typographic resistant, which is the work that I contributed. And I want to bring you into my practice, how I make the work, what drives me, and how I got to that place. So many moons ago, I was inspired by Professor Sakima Fundiko's TED Talk from 2018, Ingenuity and Elegance in Ancient African Alphabets, a TED Talk that he did. And at the end, he said something quite profound that really stuck with me, and it made me really rethink how I saw the world. And the quote reads, "It is also time that designers in Africa stop looking outwards. They've been looking outward for a long time, yet what they were looking for has been right there within grasp, right within them." And for me, that really made me look around myself and then start to see the world quite differently. So what does looking inward mean for me? For me, looking inward is about questioning, research, and observing my surroundings. I try to create work that connects with people. Create work that an older grandmother is able to identify, and the newer generation is able to look and question, like, wait, I think I've seen this. I think, and then almost try and link the two generations. Here's a more simplified and updated chart of my thinking process. Everything usually is centered around decolonizing design. And this chat for me has always been kind of the same in terms of either personal practice or even when it comes to doing work for clients. So contextualization, what is it? What's the problem? And then research. Research for me is always Sankofa. It is learning from the past, pulling data, extracting, like going back, data collection. And then from that, then I extract whatever. I'm extracting from that the pattern, the symbol, the objects, the ceremony. And then it then becomes now an idea of synthesizing new meaning and new ideas, either combining two things or many things, in the hopes of creating new meaning, new ideas, or speculating. And for me, or Mamka it's always in the middle, the past and the present, and sometimes the future. And my roles always change depending what it is, but most of the times this idea of being an educator, a translator, a revealer, and sometimes, design liberator. And how does that look like? And I think for me, the idea of the educator is always almost like in every single process or work that I create, because it's almost like I relinquish myself and I play the role of almost like just wanting to educate people about something, whatever the thing is, here's how people used to write, here's this thing, here's what this thing is, and using that to say something. For example, just before the COVID pandemic, I started this project called Africa Love Letters, which was literally just my personal practice of just experimenting with letter form. But then how I did that was Sankofa, me going back and learning from history, learning for myself. But also the things that I learned, I then take them out and then I then present them to people. So in this case, the markings from the Wadabe people, I then use that to celebrate the 60th mark for Chad. And this is literally just me creating these works on myself. So in this case, I'm creating something, but I'm using something from that region to create that design form. When Burkina Faso was celebrating like the 60th anniversary, I use the Sun Spirit mosque from the Burkina Faso as an inspiration to create that, instead of using our normal grids, I use a Dynamos to actually pull out the grid and create 173, and through this is just me experimenting, but also me showing that design can come from literally any single thing, every single object. Same here. And for me, it's all about every single thing has got a story. And for me, that story is the most powerful one. For example, these are ancestral objects that I take the form that I then distort to create the 60, and for me, it is to say we can pull out design from everywhere around us. And then how does it translate to commercial work as a graphic designer, and graphic design always tells us, how we need to simplify things. And then always like, I'm going to go the opposite of that. I'm going to look around myself and I'm like, what forms are there? And I'm going to reference that, which is what I'm doing. So when then it comes to creating work as a graphic designer, I then get approached by Integrated Project Alliance, which is a South African architecture, industrial design and construction company concerned about detail, right? And then I use that same practice to say, cool, how do I show African design? Where can I look for architecture, interior design and construction in African history, in South African context, And that takes me to these, like these dome-shaped houses, that are made with grass and sticks, but they're very quite, one, they're all recyclable. Two, when it's hot outside, they're cold inside. When it's cold outside, it's warm inside. And also they're all circular because when people sit around it, nobody is giving each other the back. So we are all going to be talking whilst looking in each other's eyes. So everything's quite considered. And the detail work, it's quite very much very impressive. So for me, this was one of the examples of detail in its highest form, you know, and use this as an inspiration to create that mark for IPA. And then that becomes the inspiration and then ended up creating this logo. So using the surroundings, using the knowledge to create something that reflects the region, but also it's instead of pulling ideas from other continents, I'm using what's around that to say, when somebody looks at it like, wait, I know what this is, this is what I grew up looking at, you know what I mean? And that is very important for me. Like people being able to see themselves in the stories that are represented either on a logo, on TV, on posters, and that becomes inspiration. Or when I was approached by Trevor Sturman when he wanted to start Domina Africa, which is a storytelling a platform, and the question that I asked myself was, okay, cool. So you wanna showcase African stories. You wanna showcase that Africa has got expertise. And my question was, where is the oldest place that you could find African knowledge, right? And through my research, this this came up, which is Timbuktu, one of the places that knowledge resides in Africa, one of the oldest universities. And for me, it was the architecture there that was also very different, very inspiring. And for me, that was again became another visual inspiration to say, I want somebody who knows this, but say, wait, I know what that is, And for me, being able to see this different, like how this structure is built, using that as an inspiration. So then using these forms, using those sticks sticking out to create the logo, then became the logo itself. And I'm pretty sure, but now you can now start to see that most of my work, I'm always trying to preserve the inspiration itself because I want people to be able to identify that inspiration somehow. Sometimes the inspiration, doesn't come out, but most of the times it does. And especially for this one, and especially when it's just the M on its own, you can still see almost like as if it's an architectural structure. And that, in most of my work, that is what I'm always trying to preserve this unknown artist, who was there 200 years ago, and I am just revealing it. I'm just extracting it and bringing it into a new modern term. And again, and then in that way, I am almost like emphasizing another way of showing how design has always been there. It wasn't just called design; it was just another different term. So when it then came to Peter Pike, like his work is very much my apologies, my notes. His work is very much literally amplifying oppressed voices through print. And that for me links with the work that I do, for me, it's about design. It's about bringing another side of design. His work is literally like reactive to political oppression. It's never bound by any region. He was able to do work from everywhere. Wherever there's oppression, he would voice it out through prints. And this idea of using typography literally as a vessel for a message. So the work that I did were literally along those lines to say, how can I preserve that? So then by creating 3 posters, then I then tried to almost like keep an essence of him in there, whereas bringing new voices. So almost like embodying the spirit of Peter Pike's um how how he would, if he was here, how would he do things? Literally, that is how it was, you know. So his work is about advocate for social justice, which is almost same as mine. Mine then becomes quite more different, because then some of the work that I've been presented here is the idea of decolonizing writing systems. I think, which is what I read in my first reading. So the first thing was to almost like gather the quotes first, gather the people that I'm going to use, right? And then like those oppressed voices, you know. So the first one is Nelson Mandela. And the quote was, as long as poverty, injustice and gross inequality persist in our world, none of us can truly rest. And this code literally speaks to social justice, economic inequality, global justice, human rights, moral responsibility, and ideas of poverty eradication. The second one was pride is really kind of reminiscent of just the rights and the opportunities that this community has fought for so hard. And it's not just in South Africa, it's across the continent. And this was last year by Alison Polo. And this quote talked about LGBTQ plus rights, equality and civil rights, intersectionality in African contexts, pride and visibility, social movements across Africa, and Pan-African activism. And then the third one was the future, I hopeful will see more protection, not with people being pushed out, but through community of protection. And this is Noshe Mbutuma. And also this was also last year. And this talked about land rights, environmental justice, and indigenous rights, community-led conversations, and displacement and development. Yeah, and also sustainable futures. So with these 3 codes, these then became the oppressed voices that needed to be amplified. And then did literally my practice, these ideas of almost extracting the letter forms themselves, trying to see how to write them, you know. So I looked at almost most of his works to try and extract these letters from, you know. And then at the end, I was able to create a number of letters, not just one A, but quite a lot. And then through that, I was able to create the work itself, which is currently being exhibited right now, I presume. So these are just screenshots of the work. And the point is not to, I think most people, when they ask me, so do you see yourselves in these works? I do, you know. I try not to take on a bigger role. I think my role is almost like the amplification of those voices, which is almost like what Peter Piek does. And for me, it is that role, you know, showing, you know, educating the other side. And that is more important, you know. You know, sometimes I always say that I see myself almost as a tool to community. And that way, that makes my work much more bigger than me, than just me being the designer. You know, yeah, and yeah, thank you. And these are the 3 screenshots. And then after this, it was the animation. And thank you to Sachi, who helped me with the animation. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Osmond. Wonderful.
Thanks, Osmond.
Thank you, thank you.
Felipe, you there? Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Do you hear me well?
Yes,
Yes.
very well.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Osmond. I'd like to thank you all for being here. I'm really glad that I'm in the company of Sophie, Gabriela, Daniela, Osmond, Matheus, and Daniela. And as a moderator, I think my job is to follow the speakers somehow. And I would like to make a general comment about your work as a whole, even, and then hear from you something about this question and this comment that I'm gonna make, and it will sound very general. I'm sorry, but I think it's the way I can find to navigate between different content, different forms, and different contexts and history practice. So I think Matheus did put something very important at the end of his talk. That is, there's a question of form. So it's not just an European form applied to a Brazilian context, as he said, but it's also a problem of finding our own or new forms of expressing. And I think you both are very sensitive to it. That is not only you are artists thinking in context, in historical context, and historical events and persona, but you are also thinking about exactly how this is going to be drawn, exactly how this is going to be designed, so to convey your specific message. So I want to stress this. I want to call your attention to the question of form, and considering that we are talking we are now in an intersection between art and graphic design discipline somehow. I would like to ask first about the concept of geometry, of Euclidean, or if you like, pure geometry, how it is reappropriated in your work, if it is of a European matrix or not. I think in the case of Osmond, there's a very strong case to be made about the African scripts as another source for geometry, as a source that is not without color, that is a source that is not without meaning, that is not pure syntax, as it is thought of geometry in the modernist design in Europe. And Matheus, you specifically, knowing your work before before you even show your piece, I know you have a strong relation to music. I know you are a musician, you are a composer, and I would like you to say something about let's say, the compositional form of your work in the Museum für Gestaltung. It is a duet. You know that it is a strong form that is, let's say, a historical form of music. And I would like you to make talk about a little bit about that. And I think in your case, more than geometry, there is also something about abstraction that is also thought as an European invention, but it's not really. Music is, from the very beginning, the abstract art par excellence. So I'd like you to both talk about. Please feel free to talk in either order you like.
Well, if I can start, I'm thinking about, well, this idea that you said about that I touched at the end of my presentation. Unfortunately, just at the end, I need a few hours to convey this whole thing, this whole idea. But just to let you know, I come actually from literature. I'm graduated in literature here in Brazil, and that's why I chose a text for you students of Daniela by Roberto Schwartz. I know his name should be pronounced Schwartz, but here in Brazil we call him Schwartz. And he's a student of he really studies Machado de Assis, the Brazilian author, and that's when everything started. But I think that just to my point, he started a way of thinking that a lot of art historians afterwards got a hold on, and one of them is Rodrigo Naves, and he created a very important idea that I take that is very dear to my heart, which is the idea of he calls it in Portuguese forma difícil and dificuldade da forma, which might be a little bit hard to translate, but is the difficult form and the difficulty of form. That might be a possible translation. So in a way, this idea of trying to come up with our own form here in Brazil, I think it has a lot to do with what he calls the difficult form, which is to work with this not fitting. When you get geometry or whatever, you get this very austere European concepts you apply to Brazil, they don't fit. And the theory of Rodrigo Naves is that the best work is done in this out of sync fashion. In this way, that's when the Brazilian form arises. Because Brazil was built by Europe. In a way, we had a society here that people tried to destroy, and then Europeans came, right? So it is a society that is based on European standards, but they don't fit here. So our form, in a way, is about this out of sync fashion and this non-fitting idea. So that's where I think Brazilian form comes from. So about music specifically, it's a shame that you couldn't hear the piece, but I hope you can see in the exhibition as well, of course. But the idea was to make it to make these differences hearable in a way. We can see the differences, but also we might hear the differences, and that's why I would like to call it as a duet. The idea of the duet is that this first concept, I think I stole it from Christian Marclay. You probably know the artist Christian Marclay, that does pieces like the video quartet and so on. So I think it's a very beautiful idea to think about musical forms, but in regards to visual arts. So this is what I always do in my piece. All my pieces are in a way about the relationship between sound and visuals. So in a way, it's a very abstract way of dealing with the same kind of contradiction, of paradox, in a way, right? So use a musical form to talk about the visual thing. So it's a way to embody this contradiction in the work itself. But the title just being duet, I think it was too little. So that's why it's called duet contrapunct, which is also a term that comes from music, but then parallax, which is a term that comes from the visual aspect, which is like this differences of perspective, right? So in a way, the title of the work tries to embody this idea of the differences between Brazilian form and European form, and the shifts in paradigm and the shifts in form itself. So that's why I went to music first, which is the place, you're right, I'm more comfortable with. As you can see, I'm in my studio surrounded by equipment, so that's the thing that I know the most.
Please, Osmond.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So I think for me, because right now I am questioning quite a lot of like the issues of writing itself. And the reason why I suggested the African alphabets by Professor Sakama Fandiko was I think it was one of those books that when it came out, it was like for many times when you thought about or when we learned about African design or African writing, it was just the Egyptian hieroglyphs, only just that. Um, but then what the book does, it literally goes and says, literally, there's quite a lot of writing that was there. And then because of colonialism, it came in and literally suppressed all that development, right? And right now I'm speaking in English. And my practice is like even before doing coming back to graphic design, I did graphic design first, and then I went into the industry. I did advertising, and there's certain words that you can't translate into English. You know, like there's certain phrases, there's certain things that you cannot translate. You know what I mean? And sometimes a certain expression exists as just an expression and can't be put down into words. And that also exists in everywhere in other cultures. You know what I mean? Whereby people struggle to even say, what is this thing in English? You know what I mean? Because you can direct translate it and it becomes flat, and through advertising, that's when my call to go back to design came and say, you know what, like we're literally not expressing ourselves quite well, you know what I mean? And then the few times that you're able to communicate in a local language, you know what I mean? Like for example, um, like for example, right now, like in South Africa, most advertising is done in English, unless if it's a local radio station, for example, Ukhozi FM, then it's Zulu, Ikwekwezi, then it's Ndebele, and then other languages, then it's Afrikaans, you know what I mean? And whereas on national TV, very few times do something is communicated in the local language, because then it's then this idea of we wanna push for a lot of people to buy, so let's make it for everybody. This idea of um, universal being universal, so everybody understands English, right? Even though yes, we understand English, but not clearly, and sometimes doesn't express the emotions. So, and for me, design is that, you know what I mean? It is taking that object that we sometimes see for granted, and bringing that into my design inspiration, that people who use it are able to say, oh wow, because most of the times that sometimes I would get briefs, people are thinking outside of Africa. Oh yeah, no, no, I want a logo. I want a company like Nike. I want this, you know what I mean? And they never get inspired by local things, and then what end up happening is that then those things then end up being discarded. And then when people outside of the country come, they saw those things as valuable. And then when they take them out of the country, then they become quite valuable, and so my work is most of the time like trying to say, let's see value in our work. Let's see value with the things around us before anybody else around it. I mean, so for example, right now I have attempted to create a new writing system for my mother language, Northern Ndebele, by literally archiving cultural objects. So using cultural objects of my mother's culture to create a new writing system. And then some of those things that I'm archiving are things that people have now forgotten. For example, going to Njelele to go dance for the rain. Now that is now demonized because most people have now turned to Christianity. So maybe in the next 40 years, people would have forgotten about that, because even now reading about it is very rare. So you have to now go to the elders to read some of those things. So my work is now becoming more and more typographic. And yeah, and I think for me, I love, you know, I was taught graphic design and, references of Swiss design. You know what I mean? And literally like, but I think when I'm working, it's now I try to decolonize myself, you know what I mean? And almost to say, cool, who am I creating for? You know what I mean? Am I creating for people in Sweden, or am I creating for people here? And then I try to create work for them, by giving them something that they're able to identify, rather than giving them something, out there, and also as a way of trying to create a new visual language. And then all this is just me trying to create. I don't know if I've been able to um, answer your question.
No, we are following
But yeah,
perfectly.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Now, we have to go now to questions and answers. I just want to make a final brief comment because your work really inspired me to start to think about those things. In your case, Osmond, I think is very worth noting that when you access directly those African or ancestral objects, as you said, as material for your work. It's for me, it's kind of in graphic design. It's kind of a historical short circuit because some of the works that you were showing, maybe Picasso saw in Trocadero in Paris, and then you don't have Mondrian and Duisburg without Picasso, and you don't have Max Bill without Duisburg. So there's kind of a, let's say, um bypassing or short circling
yeah.
this discipline. And in your case, Matheus, I think it was very fortunate that you brought in your presentation the sardine scan coqueiro, because I think they are superb as everybody else here in Brazil. Sorry they are gone, but I think they are a beautiful case of geometry misplaced, because okay, it's art, it's concrete art, it's pure geometry, but it's a fish. So let's say defeats the purpose of abstract art. So with this, I'm stop here, and I would like very much to receive questions, and we continue to talk.
Okay, thank you, Felipe. I think I look into this round. We have made a collection of questions, but as we don't have much time, I would like to ask you if there's something came up during the presentations that you would like to ask. Yes, Alice?
I just have a question for Osmond Tshuma, because I really wonder, like, why we always talk about like African design as like the whole continent together, and I think it sounds really weird for me because like like Africa is such a huge continent which is so like completely different cultures, and so I just wanted to ask like how do you group this to say like, okay, this is African design, and instead of saying, okay, this is more representing maybe the South African, or I don't know, maybe you can also do something about more East African countries, but I think it's completely different, like the influences in culture in the whole continent. So I was wondering about that.
Thank you. Thank you. That's actually a very good question. Yeah, like I think I did like a little short study last year whereby I was actually questioning that, whereby I was like should it be African design or should it be Zimbabwean design? And then also how does Zimbabwean design look like, or like how does South African design look like, right? And then also I think for me it's that before Zimbabwe, like Zimbabwe never existed like 200 years ago. Zimbabwe exists because of Britain, because of four European countries. The borders exist because of the Berlin Conference of 1884, where none of the African countries were. I can't go to some of those countries because I need a visa, a system that was imposed, you know what I mean? And then why we still can't remove that, it literally baffles me up until now. You know what I mean? So it's and the Africa Love Letters project was that, you know, it was to educate myself about African countries, you know what I mean? And by opening it up as Africa, I think for me, it just connects me to the whole continent, just framing it as Zimbabwean design, because by me just framing it as Zimbabwean design, it almost feels like I'm caging myself, you know, like for example, at the lower side of Zimbabwe, you've got at the borders, which borders Zimbabwe and South Africa. When the borders were created, what you have is that you actually have people from one side who talk the same language as the other one from one side. Then the border just cuts in between. So then now you've got communities that are now separated, you know, which is what happened, you know, in most places where borders were put in. Right now, I'll say there's a move for people to find, I think I'll say their identity in terms of graphic design. And for example, right now, you know, if you had to ask, you know, how does South African graphic design look like? You know, I think South Africa, because South Africa has been doing quite a lot, and I think South African graphic design itself, you know, can stretch into political resistance during the apartheid time. I think same as Zimbabwe, also there also quite a lot of print design that was done during that time also. But it's very hard to say, okay, cool, here's Zimbabwean, you know, and also that is where we are right now to say, you know, how can we redefine it, you know, and for me to leave it as African design, it feels much more comfortable because I'm able to link up with people from Nigeria, you know, designers from Nigeria, and then like share ideas, you know, from Ghana, you know, without having borders, because that is how things were way back. You know, there wasn't any borders. You know, I was able to move from one space to another, get there, tired, and then they're like, oh no, just rest here for some time, and then the next thing you know, I'm there for the next 40 years. So for now, I don't have a clear answer, but Africa feels much more open without any borders. It's almost like a way of, I think African design feels much more inclusive than saying Zimbabwean design, and just closes myself down. Whereas African design, I'm able to interact and learn and reach out to other designers across the region. Like right now, I'm part of a collective of type designers who are trying to redefine what typography looks like, you know, in creating typefaces and all that. So yeah, I know it's kind of bit vague, but I hope it helps. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you very much. There any other questions from your side?
I don't remember which one is in New York.
Osmond.
Awesome. Maybe a question about the city of New York. To me, it seems like it's the opposite. It has so many different people in one city. So is that a motivation for you to go there, to live actually?
Yes. I think because I stayed in Johannesburg for like so, it feels like every single city that I go to, or a country I go to for my education, I tend to stay there. So I was in South Africa I did my undergrad from 2010 to 2013, and then I stayed there. Johannesburg is just a beautiful, rich, hot pot of different nationalities, and I feel like New York is also that, and the diverse of people. I think that is very quite inspiring for me. Yeah, I don't know. I just love being around a lot of people that I get to learn from. Yeah.
You? Any other questions?
I would like to ask a question, if I may.
Yes, of course.
But I will give the privilege to the students. But yeah, so thank you so much for this lecture. So this project has been 2.5 years in the making, and I thought it was very insightful. And I think maybe tying it back to the title of the lecture today, when listening to you two, I think that we are now post universality of modernism, as in a way that the geometry, as Felipe said, is a way to kind of connect to each other or to have a reception of design that works outside of local references. And now listening to you too, I think we are moving past that, or maybe it was always that we were past that, but in a European perspective, we are open to that now. So I would like to ask you to, is that observation maybe correct? And also for you in this research project? And then the other thing is that for me, you also presented two different methodologies of working with archives or working with inspiration. And one is the tool of comparison, which I think is very present with Matheus and also connects to the idea of what is in data. And the other one is in deduction. And for me, the method of comparison, I wonder if that's still in a way applicable or relevant when kind of reflecting on what you've spoken about.
Yeah, first of all, about your observation, I think it's extremely precise. I remember when you're speaking of a teacher that I had in the university, he said that this is the epistemological advantage of Brazil, which means that in a way, not only modernism, but if you want to use the right term, probably capitalism in a way, it needs to be global to work. And since the beginning, we Brazilians already knew that it didn't work. And for Europe, it took a while for Europeans to find that out. And I think that's the thing, the contradictions of this kind of society were so huge in Brazil since the beginning, since the start of the country, that it's kind of obvious in a way, right? So importing modernism and seeing that it doesn't fit here actually means that it might be wrong everywhere else in a way. Of course, this is a generalization, but in a way, the ideas of modernism are thought to be global, are thought to be universal. So if they don't work in Brazil, they actually don't work anywhere else in a way. So I think that was something that we found out really early, and I think that it took a while for Europe to find it out. But I think everybody now finds it and knows it, I think. And about the comparison, I'm not sure if I understand what you meant by it not working or not being valid anymore after what did we said that made it invalid? I didn't understood that. If you can expand on it.
I think it connects to this idea of the universality or the universality of modernism not working, in the sense that for example, with the two archives, maybe that's one of the key points we also spoke about, is that between art and design. So we're a design museum, so that's why certain artworks don't show up, or why certain pieces are not archived compared to the archive in Sao Paulo. So what I've just instinctively, also because I'm an art historian, is that the method of comparison, you're always a little bit in a bind to legitimize what you're comparing with each other. So for example, the disclaimer of what the institution is and what data and why they have this data set. Or so for me, it's a little bit so if you have to, or to make a comparison in the way that I do it as an art historian is that you always put the disclaimers below it, why the comparison might not be legitimate. In a sense, and I think that's also for the students relevant, is when you're using something as an argument that's already existing and you're putting yourself into relation with it, how much of it do you have to disclaim as kind of yeah, so for me, it's really a question about the legitimization of a method of comparison when working with archives and the
Yeah,
different approaches to it.
I'm not sure if I can answer it, but what I'm thinking as a first thought is for me it's all about the context, right? I think the idea of my piece is that's why actually the piece is not in English. It is in Portuguese and in German, because I think the context really changes and everything. So I think this contextualization what you're saying, this legitimacy comes from contextualizing what we are looking at, and from what vantage point are we using to look at this corpus? That's the thing. So for instance, of course, I feel that you looking at my piece is completely different from me looking at the piece because I'm Brazilian. So in a way, I think that the disclaimer is needed everywhere because every corpus comes from a context. So in a way, when you collect things in Museum für Gestaltung, it's not only that it's just a design museum, but it's a design museum that was founded in whatever time it was, and the founding comes from this place or this other place, and everything else makes part of the decision making in the construction of the archive. So of course, we cannot make a disclaimer that is as big as the thing itself, right? So I just remembered something that we talked about at the beginning, which is like a text by Italo Calvino, by Jorge Luis Borges, the writer, in which it's just a quote, a very funny one, in which a king asked to create the perfect map. And the way that they found out to make the perfect map was to make it one by one. So the map was the size of the thing it was representing. So that's the only way that we can do things without disclaimers, I think, because there is always this kind of very important context that really changes the perspective of the whole thing. So actually, I think that my work is not a true comparison. I think it's a false comparison by design, by choice. It's like showing, okay, everything would work, like I can compare this with everything else, and each other data set and a different story will come up from it. So in a way, it's trying to show how false it is. So this is a long-winded way to say I think you're right.
Okay, thank you. I'm afraid we have to move on as the students have to go to other classes. But from our side, thank you very, very much. It was very inspirational. Could have lasted longer. Very insightful inspects into your work and how you work with also archived material. Just quickly, Gabriela prepared a Miro board to exchange with students from Brazil. So you both get the links, and I'll send it to you afterwards. And from my side, thank you. I don't know if you want to also say something else, Gabriela?
No, I wanted to say thank you to everyone involved. I wish we had more time to continue this amazing discussion. I learned a lot and it felt really good to be part of this lecture. Thank you so much, everyone involved. I hope the students liked it. And for sure, there is this Miro board. Please add your information. And the idea is that we share that with the students in São Paulo, and you will be able to connect also with the designers. Sometimes we don't see the connection right away, but maybe next semester you will think about a project that totally connects with the people we saw today, and that will make sense to connect with Brazilian students or Osmond or Matheus, so feel free to do so and take the opportunity to connect internationally. And we will also share with the people in India. So feel free also to reach out to us at any time. My colleague just shared the information about Swissnex. You can follow us there as well to see all the discussions we are doing. And yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for your time.